to lose? How does this nightmare set you free?
Hello everyone, welcome once again to Constantine Discussions. I am Captain Logan.
I'm Steve Baxi.
Steve, thank you for filling in for Eric this week. Eric has been, as I mentioned on Arrow, in case you didn't see that, Eric has had some difficulties in technology that are making it difficult for him to make it on shows right now, and I don't know how long this is going to last, so I'm hoping that he's able to come back sometime soon, but in the meantime, Steve's going to be filling in. Thanks a bunch, Steve. And he'll be kind of waiting in the wings in case we need him, and we may even start doing some of these with all three of us because I think that might be fun too.
Interesting.
Steve keeping up with stuff, being super awesome and filling in, and Steve is always great and insightful and fun. So we're going to talk about Constantine today. Unfortunately, we were not able to record last week for a couple different reasons. One of them being that my new son was born, so I was not available the night that Eric and I usually record, and so we had to skip that episode. So we will briefly discuss a little bit The Devil's Vinyl, which was the third episode, last week's episode, before we get into today's episode, and we're not going to talk about questions and comments from last episode or from our last discussion show because it's been a couple weeks and it's kind of old news now. So we'll use the time we usually use for talking about The Devil's Vinyl, which is a super cool episode title. Really dug that, and I like that idea in the first place. I like the way that worked thematically. I thought it was really neat to play with. And there was more of a twist to it than I expected, but playing with the kind of that classic idea of using something like a deal with a recording studio to as a deal with the devil, and then making it a literal deal with the devil. I thought that was cool. I also really appreciated that there was something a little bit sympathetic to the reason that the lady made the deal with the devil for her husband, because I kind of didn't expect it to go there, especially with the kind of more two-dimensional angle from the previous episode with the woman and her husband.
Right, yeah, I agree. I really like that whole music comes from the soul and therefore you get yourself from the devil, you're doomed to go back to it kind of thing. And then everything they did with that woman and her husband and about like where their music came from, all coming from a deals with the devil, it's all sort of tainted. And John's looking at them and he feels bad for them, he pities them, but it's not like this generic, well, he has cancer and we feel bad. It's more of they got where they are through trickery with the devil, and so their life is already kind of sad and it's already kind of pathetic, and so what more could this guy take from them? So let's just end their contract and give them at least their life back to a certain extent.
Yeah.
This John is really not really different, but this John is different in that he cares about people a lot more than the one in the Hellblazer comic does, and we'll get into that in the next episode, but like, he's got sympathy and he's got tears in his eyes and stuff, and I enjoy that he's not just straight off the page just doing whatever the writer at the time of the book would do for the character.
Yeah, it's cool that you're suggesting, I mean, that you're mentioning that, but that you're not finding it a problem. I'm glad that they're earning that. I think they are too. And of course, you know the characters from comics better than I do, but I like that it doesn't feel, and maybe, I mean, you're saying that. I don't know if I would if I'd read the book, but probably. I feel like it's not watered down. It seems like it's a really cool compromise where it's like, we gotta do that for network broadcast television because what's on the page is way too far off the beaten path, right? Like it would be hard to be anything like accessible. I think the show is going just far enough to still make this guy someone who makes a lot of bad choices, but for what he thinks are the right reasons, and he has empathy, and of course when we get into today's episode, that's where the big but comes in, and I love that it's there, and I really feel like we needed episodes like this one where he makes these kinds of big choices where like he will do he has a bit of an ends justifies the means thing. He will do the really horrible things when he thinks he needs to, but there's lines he won't cross, and I like that before we get into today's episode where he manipulates a man to die to fix a problem, we've had him do something like he won't take the record, and even no matter how powerful it is. I'm glad we got that. He makes somewhat of a noble choice there, and within that context, I bought it. I like that there's a line that is dividing him and Papa Midnight.
Yeah, and I like that they're considering it. Like, he has that thing with Manny of, like, we know that you want this record, you just can't have it. Constantine is in the back of his mind thinking, how can I get this record? How can I get everything I want out of this? And ultimately, he can't. He can't make that equation balance out on both sides, so he does the right thing. But it's not just because it's the right thing. It's because there's too much of a cost with the opportunity with it.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's really interesting.
It's not completely noble. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's a little tainted. And there's that criticism of this Constantine is a little bit softer. And I don't think he's softer. I think it's just this one is a lot less emotionally withered than the one in the comics is.
If he is softer, though, I think it's working. Like, even
if
you want to look at it that way, I don't think that's a problem.
Him around, but he's got emotional reactions to things, and that kind of serves the same purpose of his baggage is less literal and more human in that way.
And once again, I just feel like on a week-to-week basis for a TV show that is trying to, bring in... I'm not saying that it has to be a lot like everything else people see, and I do feel like this is a really unique kind of show. But I think that it realizes that it's going to have to throw an audience of 3-4 million people more of a human bone. I find myself wondering, I guess some of it too is just, this is kind of my taste. I wonder if I were to start reading a lot of Hellblazer comics, if I would like them as much after seeing this version.
That's tough to say. Because the announcement of the show is what got me into the comics in the first place. And it's really easy to appreciate them on different levels, so I'm not sure how you'd react like going backwards that way. It's weird because this show is surprisingly off the page in a lot of regards, but it still deviates in some crucial ways, and I don't know how these writers are managing to get it to work, but they're doing the comic book Hellblazer, they're doing the comic book John, they're doing the comic book Mythology. They're just making it more accessible to other people. Like, the comics is really a taste thing, but I think this show is almost anyone's thing if they just give it a chance.
Yeah, with the exception of it's violent. I mean, it's dark. It might be too much for some people in that department. But beyond just the occult themes and its willingness to go as dark as it does for network television, I'm with you. I think that there is potentially something here for everyone. I think this is potentially, oddly, and it's not doing as well naturally, but I think that, I don't know, my instincts tell me that this seems to be a thing that ought to be more accessible than Gotham is, even.
Yeah, I think it is. I mean,
but I don't know.
The big things to compare this to would be like Supernatural and Grimm, but I think Supernatural even is not as relatable as this show, and this has only been about 4 episodes in. Supernatural's got a very specific dynamic, and this show's got a very specific human element, and I think this ultimately wins out in that regard. Supernatural's always been more about the plot than it is the characters.
Well, and
then this is not that way.
And it's so deliberate about everything. Once again, first of all, there's just a really specific set of rules. We're understanding this world. But the other thing is that from the very beginning, the whole premise, which is, as I understand it, pretty well straight off the page, the premise of John is trying to go down a path of redemption, but he keeps making the same choice, the same mistakes, because he doesn't know how not to in trying to attain his goal. I just think that's a thing that is pretty relatable.
Yeah. He in the when we go to the next week's episode, but he says 2 things that are contradictory, and one of them, one time he's lying, but whether he said that or the other thing, the results are the same. He says people can't change, then he lies and says people can change.
Yeah.
But no matter what he said, the ending would have been the exact same thing. And so, in some ways, it's out of his control. But in other ways, how many times is he asking for it? How many times has he turned away people that could help him? That whole thing with Papa Midnight, that character is obviously a lot more off the deep end than John is. He's a little bit, not crazier, but he's a little bit more clearly of, if it suits my purposes, it's fine, and it doesn't matter if there's a greater good, because there's nothing beyond me.
Yeah.
But there's still a bit of Papa Midnight in John, And you could see very easily that it's a power play for him, it's a power play for Heaven, and John could stumble into that because he's just trying to find his own existence between those two higher powers fighting each other.
Yeah. Well, and he's also, I think mostly he's just trying to find a reason to be allowed in heaven. I mean, which is exactly the same thing that Movie John had.
Yeah. And it's interesting because that doesn't come out like as stereotypical or generic of like, well, there's a chance he can come out and go to heaven and stuff, and that seems really easy, but it's not. He's earning everything he's doing. And you could see very easily why he could go to hell or why he could go to heaven and what the negotiation process is. It's not like the Garth Ennis thing. Like, a lot of times you read Garth Ennis stuff, and not Hellblazer, but necessarily, but Garth Ennis stuff is very, well, hell's bad, but heaven's even worse, and he's very, like, heavy-handed with that. And this show has got some of those same ideas. There isn't much of a difference between the two parties, but it's not making one worse out than the other, and it doesn't seem like it has its agenda about what's better or worse. It's all about the characters, and less about what the writers want to say there.
But I would say that just within the context of the show, we don't know enough about Heaven yet to make that call, because Heaven is mostly represented by one character, and you don't know what his motivations are.
Yeah, fair enough. And then, of course, the demons, we don't know where their allegiances lie either. They're all been kind of like individual sources for different problems.
Yeah. Something I really liked was the discussion about why the devil cares about souls.
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool,
was
and that he's just trying to get revenge for getting cast out of heaven in the first place, and it's almost, although to what you were saying a minute ago, if we get, I don't know how much more we're going to get about that, but it could be that in this universe, God is kind of to blame for all the horrible things that happen, because if only he had kept the devil around, none of this would have happened. I think all that's kind of interesting. If it turns into just the devil's just trying to get revenge. He's just upset because he doesn't get to sit at the big boy table anymore.
Yeah, and importantly, like, that line, that delivery of like what he's talking about, it doesn't feel like just random exposition.
No, it's not. It seems
this show
calculated.
Very clearly understands how its mythology works, and it's able to shoot that out whenever it needs to without holding your hand while doing it.
And I trust it. Like when it throws me bones, when it tells me stuff like that, I'm like, okay. I don't think this is random. I don't think that it's retroactive. I don't think that as it's going, it's making up stuff. It helps that it's got source material and it's sticking pretty close to it. But yeah. I feel like it knows how it's going to use all that stuff, and I'm kind of just along for the ride. This is a really confident show. It knows just what it wants to be.
Yeah, and I mean, you said it in your first review, but Constantine has that line of, if you're not confused, then you aren't paying attention.
Right.
And he doesn't say it in the next 3 episodes, but in every one of them, there is a little bit of that. John understands this world better than we will, and he's not going to tell us everything, but we'll know when we need to. And the mythology of it just doesn't come out of nowhere. Like, it's not, at the end of the day, there's a fix-all that gets everything straight. There's history to this, and when we get to that whole eating the contract thing, and about like how the devil's minions like gather souls and stuff, it's not random exposition. Like, there's a mythology there, and it's delivered like mythology and not like exposition or just fixing the end of the plot at the very end of the episode.
I was really drawn to the notion of every spell has a price.
Yeah.
That's a thing that I always latch on to. Just actions always have consequences, and this is a world that humans don't belong in, and it's taking its toll on this guy. It continues to help make him more sympathetic and tragic, because he's willing to lose years off his life, and seems to almost sometimes even know, like, maybe how many. I get the sense that he's like, there's another 10 years I'm not going to get it back. And he's willing to do that partially because he's hoping to save the soul of the girl that he condemned, partially because he's hoping that there might be some kind of hope for him, but also because, as I think Eric was suggesting in our first episode, that he kind of feels like he deserves it. They're like he keeps getting dragged back into this, and I think part of what keeps him there isn't just a sense of duty, but a sense of guilt.
Yeah, like, there's a bit of an atonement for every soul he saves is one more thing that makes him able to live with himself.
Yeah, and it's worth all the horrible things he has to go through. You know,
Yeah.
he's learning that spell at the beginning, and it looks horrible, and you don't even know what in the world you're looking at. What's going? I kind of thought that particular spell would pay off at the end. I was a little surprised it didn't, or at least I don't think that was the same thing.
Yeah, no, it didn't really come back in any way, but I'm okay with that.
No, I am too, but I was a little surprised by it. Yeah, but then you know, when Zed asks him, about the prices that he has to pay for spells, and he's like, and he says it's like a reverse mortgage. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, and it helps because he's not broody about it. You know, like, he does the spell, and he's upset that he had to make one of his best friends come back and re-inhabit their body and relive the worst experience of their life. But he's not worried about the fact that he shaved years off his life. Like, that's just what life is shaving years off your life for him. And it also helps that we don't ever get any of those, like, stereotypical scenes of, we end the episode with him looking off in the distance and looking at how terrible his life is. It's not that simple for him, and he's able to live with himself in certain ways, but it doesn't mean he's not making compromises in that. Like, the losing a couple of days in his mortality, it may not sound really big, but like you said, you get the sense that he's done this a lot, and this is what he lives with. And so every time he does it, it's just less and less shocking for him, because that's ultimately how he lives anyway. His lifestyle is suicidal, and that's kind of like why the smoking stuff is there in the comics.
Yeah. And here, but in the background.
Which they're doing really well. I'm
doing a good job with
it. It doesn't look as gimmicky as I thought it would, of like him constantly stomping things out or having one in his hand that he flicks away. Like, it looks pretty natural.
I think there was one in today's episode where he's just holding it in his mouth while he's talking, and then it's not there anymore because he can't light up for some reason. There is a potential criticism that I have brought up before. I want to touch on again today. Didn't notice it as much in today's episode, but did in last week's. I still feel like we could be seeing a bit of a narrative cheat in constantly saying that there are coincidences that happen, or that nothing is coincidence, but then we get coincidences, and it's conveniently never explained as to why in the world they happen. And I kind of feel like the show could be, I don't know yet, but I feel like the show could be kind of cheating and explaining things away by constantly saying, "Oh, there's no such thing as consequences," or as coincidences, so that we can just keep having them, and we don't need an explanation for why they happen. I didn't understand why Bernie, the guy at the beginning, who's John's friend who dies in Devil's Vinyl, he was not compelled to play the record. I don't think the record was whispering to anyone until it was played, was the sense I got. And I could not figure out why in the world he played it.
Well, from what I remember, I thought what it was is she brought him the record to be analyzed, and while it was being analyzed, she told him, don't listen to it. But then over the headphones, he could hear it being played, and it kind of lured him. That's the way it's been operating with everyone else.
Okay, but then that's too easy, because if he knew that it was supposed to be dangerous to even hear it, then he should have turned off the sound entirely.
Yeah, I guess I'm getting the sense that he didn't think it was supernatural in any way. He thought he was just a record.
But he's friends with John Constantine.
Yeah, that's fair. It is a weird coincidence. The next episode of Feast of Friends has that little bit too of like where John's friend shows up with the demon already trapped, and we have no idea how he did that, and why didn't John just get that spell from the very beginning?
That's a good question. A couple of real quick things I wanted to mention about that episode. One of them was, this is just in general, I meant to say this in the second episode and forgot about it. This show kind of has an intro. That's exciting to me. I still wish it was
it's effective.
Well, I still wish it was a title sequence, just because, then you don't have to have, 5 minutes of credits at the beginning of an episode. That's just me. But we have an intro, and I love getting to hear that song every week because it's a really cool song, and
it's a really good score.
I really dig it. The score in this show is unbelievably good. We have more Doctor Who stuff because his lair is bigger on the inside.
That's true, and it's booby trapped with random floating spells and such. You can just go in and not have no idea where all those physics go.
Yeah. So that's a thing.
Yeah, people are really comparing it to like a cult Doctor Who, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think it works in the show's favor.
No, it does work because it's not ripping it off or anything.
No,
I think some of it is coincidental. I think some of it, maybe they're bringing out a little bit, but I think it's just because Doctor Who's really popular. It's weird that this property happens to have a couple things in common with it.
Yeah, I mean, more and more, it just makes me wish that this show was like on a British network or something, if we get a little bit more globetrotting.
Yep. That's what I think.
In every episode, I'm still getting this thing of, like, why do we have to constantly be in the US? And every time we are, how come every place looks exactly like every other place? Like, there's no variety of accents or stuff like that, and that's kind of been bugging me.
I still don't know why nobody in Atlanta sounds like they're from Georgia. I don't know.
Yeah.
And this episode, we're in Atlanta the whole time, and I never feel like that's the city we're in.
Yeah, when we get to, like, Pennsylvania in the second episode, everyone sounds like they're just from Atlanta. There's no Pennsylvania-ness to anyone's accents or the performances or anything like that. Like, it feels like they want us to feel that we're going to globetrot around the world and we're going to different locations, but they're not putting their best effort forward in making those locations varied.
And, I mean, that's a thing that we got away with in X-Files. I'm not sure why we can't do it here.
Yeah, the X-Files did it pretty well. I forget what other show does this. Arrow periodically goes to other like jungles and stuff, and it still looks really different.
You always feel like you're in a different place, and they shoot almost exclusively in Vancouver.
Yeah, Smallville with Metropolis versus Smallville, and that looks substantially different, and people talk differently.
That's easy because I don't know that they talk differently, but that's easy because it's like, okay, you're in a city versus a smaller place. But like, I don't know, this show, I'm not so worried about the landscapes as I am just that like everybody kind of talks the same. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is a minor thing. It's with this show, like, it's so good already. Like, it's easier to pick up on minor things that don't matter as much.
No, I'm with you. It's such a solid show. Let's go ahead and go into Feast of Friends. Now, I have to say real quick that I only got a chance to see this once, and it was a couple days ago. So I'm gonna try to like remember things as we're talking. I just did not get a chance to sit down and watch it again today, and I've had a lot going on. So anyway, I'm going to try to refresh myself as we go along, Steve. So what do we want to start with? I as I often like to do, let's just kind of go. I'm just going to go down some notes. The first thing is people in this show are now. I guess they got away with it last episode. We were just talking about it. I guess they somewhat got away with the whole people keep opening up the record. By the way, the little girl going toward it was terrifying. This episode, once again, why is everybody dumb enough to open forbidden things that shouldn't be open? I didn't understand that at the beginning. I was just like, yeah, you were told that's a bad idea. Why don't you just listen to people? I don't understand that.
Yeah, I mean, they did the thing of like, well, he's a drug addict and he saw all the markings in his hand and stuff. He didn't trust him, but still, I mean, I feel like that's really easy.
Yeah, I don't know. That's
and then again, we mentioned this before, but that biggest criticism is that spell. If Gary could get it trapped once, why didn't we just get that spell from the very beginning and be done with it?
Yeah. I kind of thought the exchange at the beginning with Manny was maybe a little pointless.
You mean like when he first shows up and what's her name? Zed is hallucinating those pennies from heaven?
Yeah. I wasn't real sure about it because when he showed up, he was kind of like yeah, I'm just here to meet her. And then, like, I just wanted to see her, and I wasn't sure if there was more going on there, or if it was just they kind of wanted to establish him because they were going to use him again later on in the episode, and they didn't want that to come out of nowhere. I wasn't sure there was quite enough going on there to warrant his showing up right then.
Yeah, it's strange, because every time Manny shows up, Constantine's like, well, yeah, it's relating to this big battle with this darkness thing that we don't know anything about yet.
Yeah.
But every time it happened before, like in the last 3 episodes, he would show up when John's already exposed to the mystery.
Good call.
And in this episode, he shows up before John has any idea what's going on.
Yeah.
I guess you could kind of argue like the demon got out before Manny showed up, so maybe that's why he's there. But if that's the case, why didn't he just tell John about it right then and there?
It seemed like it was a lot more to introduce him to the current subplot because he wasn't... he was in the last episode, but I don't think that there was any talk about Zed there because she wasn't really involved.
Yeah, not really. This episode was more so about, like, if John's friends have the guts to do what he does. And the previous episode, she's just kind of there to be there.
Yeah, and to remind us that he's not allowed to interfere.
Yeah, and this episode they do use it more effectively. Like I think his other two scenes are fantastic.
No, he serves a great purpose at the end. I thought, yeah, I'll just go and say it now. I thought it was really cool at the end when John's about to break into that theater. And he says, "Are you sure you want to do this?" And we have no idea what in the world he's talking about. We're like, what? Break a window? What are you talking about? And he knows what John's about to do, and he knows that John's been manipulating his old friend this whole time, and that he's about to sacrifice him to the creepy bug things. And that was terrifying. It was really good. By the way, this show is not lost production value at all.
Not at all. The effects still look great. Also, if you follow them on Twitter, they actually show you how they do some of those practical effects, like making Gary float and how the bugs multiply and stuff. That's really cool.
That's awesome. I'm glad they're doing so much practical. It looks so much better.
Yeah, it really does. It's awesome. But to your point about like when he shows up there, I really like that there's no bones about what John did. Like it's not ambiguous. John straight up manipulated Gary.
Yep.
And they're not trying to make that seem any less than it is. It was a terrible thing. John feels bad, and you're not supposed to get anything else out of it. It's not. It was ambiguous or anything like that. Like it's very clear.
No, we're not supposed to be questioning whether or not that was a horrible choice he had to make, or whether there was It's not a moral quandary. It is. It's bad, it's awful, it's unethical, and yet, what could he have done differently? How else could he have solved this problem without doing something else that was equally reprehensible? And that's what I really liked about it. I don't think it works as well if you don't have Zed questioning it as hard as she does. The very next scene, she runs up to him and is like, how dare you do this? And that immediately had me going, but wait, what else would he have done? I mean, because if it had to be a person, and the sense I got was that he couldn't have gotten rid of the demon if it wasn't in a person. And if that's the case, what else do you do? Like, go to prison and take out a convict? What do you do? He was the only choice. And yet, John had to do a horrible thing in order to get him in that position in the first place. But I like that we know, we're learning our boundaries with John. And I like that we know that he's capable of this kind of thing. But I'm also impressed that they put me in a position where I said, I can't condone it, but what else would he have done?
Yeah, and importantly, like when he's talking to Zed at the very end of it, he makes it very clear that it was Gary's choice, and he's honoring that request and stuff. But it's still like a rationalization. It's not really Gary's choice.
It is a rationalization because Gary didn't come up with that in the first place, and yet, and the other thing too is Gary wanted his life to mean something, and now it did. But is that rationalization to sacrifice a guy in a horrible, brutal death that's going to take days and days? Couldn't his life had meaning in some other way? He put Gary in a position
where the noblest thing for him to do is torture himself, and Gary can't think of a reason why that's not right.
Yeah,
like he made him doubt himself enough to where he's okay with that choice. And that's a little frightening.
And importantly, we got to remember that we've got this through line that John, of course, brings up in this again, that anybody who gets close to John gets killed, gets hurt. Bad things happen to anybody that's near him. And so, you could make a case, as I was saying earlier, that there's not any better way he could have handled it. And yet, Gary would have never been in this position if it wasn't for John in the first place. Maybe John should not ever allow anybody to work with him.
Yeah.
At all, because again, this is forbidden stuff he's dealing with. Human beings are not supposed to be involved in this stuff.
Yeah. And there's like a realm of like who's to really blame for this, and John kind of summarizes that when he's telling them about his relationship with Gary, and Zed says, well, you were using Gary for his money, and then John says, well, was Gary just buying his friends?
Yeah.
And that's pretty clear here, because you can look at it either way. Like, was it that Gary was not given a single choice, or was it that Gary's life isn't worth anything more than that?
Well, and also, aren't they both in different places, kind of using each other? Because like Gary's talked about as being a user, and everything's about just being able to get the next fix. And so he was sort of using John, but then John totally uses him at the end, and like it's not comeuppance.
Yeah, and ultimately, if it's mutual, is it really that bad? Because John doesn't seem to have like trouble with it until Gary dies.
But Gary does there for a minute. He's like, wait a minute, you totally manipulated me, and then it was like, well, because I got the sense that he would have maybe been looking for a Blaze of Glory scenario.
Yeah, at least a little bit.
A little bit. I was reminded. Have you ever seen the Star Trek episode of the Doomsday Machine?
Was it a TNG or TOS?
TOS, yeah.
Okay, I probably saw it.
With Commodore Decker, who blames himself for the death of his crew, and is trying to, and he has the whole kind of Moby Dick thing, and he's trying to destroy the creature that can't be destroyed, and at the end, he sacrifices himself because he's so guilty about it. He's got so much remorse. I was reminded a little bit of that character in this, because early on in the episode, he is kind of irrationally trying to barrel into trouble, knowing that there's really not much he can do, but he feels responsible. He's got to try something, and he's possibly going to compromise things and make situations worse because of the situations that he's going to throw himself into that he's not ready for. But he feels bad, and for good reason, because he did cause a lot of problems. So I kind of feel like he might have had a death wish anyway, and yet does that make what John did okay? No.
Yeah, because even if Gary had a death wish, John never even gives him the option that he could have anything more than that he could turn his life around and make it worth living, and he doesn't have to be Blaze of Glory.
Yeah.
John very specifically wants that end for him, and whether or not it's right's left up to us. But to John, it's very clear what the right thing to do in that situation is.
Well, what's even worse is that John even manipulates him by making it sound like he thinks that he has a future.
Yeah.
When he says people really do change, and as you said earlier, that's an outright lie. He doesn't really believe that, or at least I don't think he does. I'm still
no, he doesn't. Like he says right before that, he says, "We are who we are eventually."
Yeah.
So no matter where you come from, you will eventually sit into your ways, and there's no way to break that.
What's really sad about that is that earlier you called that a contradiction, and it was an intentional one, and yet it also contradicts the way he's trying to the way he's attempting to fix things, how he's trying to redeem himself, because after all, if everyone is just who they are, then shouldn't he expect this vicious cycle that keeps happening over and over again? That everybody that gets near him gets killed, and yet he's in an impossible place where it's like, well, what do you do? Not try. And he tried that. He went to that asylum, and ultimately he got sucked back into all of this. So it's like, what do you do?
Yeah. In the comic, it's very clear, because this episode is an adaptation of the first 2 issues of that comic.
Is it?
Yeah, it's almost exact, not exact, but like it does as close as you could possibly do given the first 3 episodes.
That's really cool.
Yeah, the comic is just as good, and it's a little bit more brutal in some ways, but the comic does the same thing of John's in this world, and there isn't an option for him just to not do things.
Yeah.
But then he also overtly goes out of his way to do certain things to get this resolution. And you wonder how much of that is a contradiction of, should John be trying as hard as he is, given what he believes? And what he does to Gary in that is, I don't want to say it's despicable, but like it's worse than what he does here. He literally locks him up against his will and ties him down for this.
Oh my goodness, really?
Yeah, like it's not even there's tears in his eyes, he's manipulating him. He lies to him, say, hey, let's get you some drugs, and then has him locked up and killed without knowing what's going on. And then he lies and says, well, don't worry, you're going to be okay. But he knows he doesn't mean it, and he's not even sad about it. It's pretty brutal, but it's doing it the same way. And through that whole story, he's being plagued with the death of one of his friends, and in this story, that's kind of served with he's feeling bad for Gary. So it's still the same character and the same idea.
Well, and of course, Gary is obviously kind of a mirror for him. He's, I feel like there's almost a connection between his heroin addiction and John's addiction to this lifestyle.
Yeah. And John doesn't see that necessarily, but I'm getting the feeling that Zed at least does.
Yeah, I think so too.
Zed I wasn't crazy about when she first showed up, or even in the second episode, but I feel like here we're finally getting her to stand out on her own, and that she's not just with John for the adventure. Like there's a side to it that she's not sure if she's ready for, and she calls him on it.
Yeah.
She's not like the doughy-eyed sidekick we had in the pilot. And even though I thought she was fine, Zed is a lot more combative with John. And I think that works because it makes John see the contradictions in his own philosophy. And even if he already sees it, it gives us a reason to understand it better.
I liked that. I like that with her power, she has this like really unfortunate thing where she gets with the whole drug thing, where she's talking early on about why she would never do drugs because she doesn't want to lose control. The whole problem is not having control. And then when she touches Gary, she gets all the negative side effects and will never get to experience the pleasure of what drug. By the way, the drug scene later on with John is hilarious. But yeah, I thought that was really sad, and once again plays into that idea of consequences of magic.
Yeah. And John makes a very clear point of like, you have to lose control a little bit before you're going to get control in the first place.
Yeah.
And that's certainly true. Like if Zed it was starting to learn to let go a little bit, then there's no telling what would have happened with Gary. Maybe she wouldn't have been affected that way. Like there's an element of she's stubborn and set in her ways the same way John is. Except she's at least a little bit more open to change. And maybe that's what John appreciates in her, is that she can be the exception to his really fatalistic way of looking at things. And yeah, so they've got a good dynamic, and it's not like it's not really generic. It's not like they're love interests right away like they are in the comics. It's not like a mentor kind of thing. It's literally these are two different people, and one's helping the other understand their world better. But through that, they're learning more about themselves, almost like a mentor-apprentice kind of thing.
So far, but I mean, let's not like accept that too readily, because there's still also this kind of background, kind of unsettling, mysterious thing about what her motivations are.
Yeah, that's true.
So we certainly don't know that she doesn't have some kind of more sinister motive, and John's been talking about that. Like he's not stupid. He's like it is too coincidental that she just showed up, and I don't know if I can trust this person.
Yeah, and that makes me wonder. Like we mentioned conveniences before, if like maybe there is like some kind of ultimate end to all these conveniences. And I would trust the show enough to do that.
I hope I can. I don't trust it yet, that far. I don't know yet, but I think it might give us that, and that would be awesome.
Yeah, agreed. It's interesting, because, I mean, Zed's a strange character, and there's clearly, like, more of a backstory to her. And with Manny, like, when he shows up and he's just interested in seeing, like, who he picked up, there's a weird, almost he's avoiding talking about her to John, and he's avoiding getting too deep into it. She says he says that she's very classical, but he doesn't do more than that. He doesn't even really look at her that much. And I mean, maybe we should say that for predictions or something, but I wonder if like there's a bigger thing that Manny's not telling John about as far as Zed's concerned.
Oh, I'm almost positive.
Manny is just as manipulative as John or anyone else in this show.
Oh yeah, I'm almost positive you're right about that. Yeah, absolutely.
And what little Manny gets to do, he still comes alive pretty well.
I think she's maybe, I don't want to go as far as to say playing the victim, but I think she might understand more about some of this occult stuff than she's letting on. I think there's a little bit of playing the apprentice, potentially.
Yeah.
You know?
That's understandable.
Like you might be falling into the trap of buying what she's selling a little bit. I don't know.
And I wouldn't mind that. Like, if the show can convince me of it and then subvert my expectations, that's all the better.
Oh yeah, no, that'd be
were you
awesome.
Bugged at all that Chaz wasn't in this episode?
Bugged. Not. I didn't think about it.
Yeah, he's so on again, off again, and I'm still wondering about that thing in the pilot, like why he can't die, or like what John's got a hold of him
Fair
on.
enough. Yeah, we're 4 episodes in now, and we still don't have any clue whatsoever about that. He's not a straight up sidekick though. Like he doesn't go with John everywhere, and so whenever he's not there, I haven't been really thinking about it, just because he's not always around.
Yeah, and I'm not minding this yet, but this show is certainly more mythology than it is answers yet. And it feels like every episode is setting something else up, and we're not getting any answers, and that's okay, because it's only 4 episodes, and some shows spoil us with more than they should
I do
right
like
away.
that it's managing to give us as much lore as it is with these very one and done complete stories in one episode.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, it'd be nice to have a little bit of closure there.
Yeah.
Just because it feels like such a minor thing. I'm not even sure if the payout to it would even be that big.
And the thing is, I don't know that we need closure so much is just like remind us that that's still a thing, because that was in a pilot that was not necessarily really going in the same direction the rest of the series is. The show does not feel in a lot of ways exactly the same show that we got in the pilot. Like as far as tonally, it mostly does. Although I thought the pilot was more playful than anything we've gotten so far. Third episode, I thought was pretty heavy, and this one was really heavy too, theme wise. But the whole Devil's Vinyl thing, as quirky as that whole idea was, it doesn't play that way at all. It's rough, right? And it was a lot less jokey and one-linery and stuff. I didn't have nearly as many quotes to write down. I was kind of surprised by just how dark it let itself go. And this episode had that too. Maybe not so much in that department, just because I felt like John got to be a little bit more of his quirky, wacky self in a lot of places, but.
Yeah, it's certainly a lot more black humor than we're getting with other TV shows, especially superhero stuff. Like with the pilot, it is a little bit more playful, but then when you get like Devil's Vinyl and A Feast of Friends and stuff, you're laughing, but you're not sure if you should. Like in Devil's Vinyl, you're making a guy eat a contract, and you know he's going to get smited by the devil at some point. You're laughing because John is strapped to a table, and he's losing a lot of blood, and a hobo might kill him.
Yeah, which is hilarious.
It's weird and dark stuff, but it's hard not to laugh a little bit.
You're just within the context of what it is, yeah.
Yeah, and then A Feast of Friends has got that a little bit. Although I found, like, with Feast of Friends, the only real jokes I saw was, like, the overt, he's hypnotizing the security guard guy.
Yeah.
And he's just dancing around. And then everything else wasn't as consistent with that. Not that it was a problem, but, like, the jokes were not on that level, and everything else was just a lot more serious.
Before we get to best moment, worst moment, there are a couple of other really quick things that I forgot to mention about the other episode that I really wanted to. One of them was I could not stop thinking about Devil Went Down to Georgia.
Yeah.
The whole time. The other thing too was sorry for jumping back and forth like this, but the other thing too was, did you, by the age of the old man who signed the guy in the 30s? 'Cause I didn't. That was weird. He would have had to have been 90-something. That, like, really?
That was weird, yeah.
How hard would it have been to have just made that 40s or 50s? I could not figure out why we had to go back that far.
Yeah, it was weird. That's like a weird actor thing. Maybe like they went to cast someone younger, but the guy just looks a lot older.
But I'm just saying, like, he didn't look 90-something.
Yeah, that's true.
I just didn't understand that. Like why in this day and age would you go to? I'm just saying, like we're in 2014, and I don't think that the show is trying to be outside of time. Why would we go to the 30s?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, you make a good point there.
I thought that was weird. Anyway,
it feels
sorry.
a bit unnecessary, and that still kind of lends to the problem of, like, we went back to the 40s. It didn't feel like, or the 20s, 30s, whatever. It didn't feel like we went back in time. And we were in Chicago for a lot of that, and it didn't feel like Chicago.
Oh, I don't agree. I thought that stuff was fine.
Okay. I don't know. It felt like it was just another set dressing. It didn't feel different.
Feast of Friends. Let's go to best moment, worst moment. What was your favorite moment for this week's episode, Steve?
It's really hard for me not to pick that very final scene of John in the bed with Gary, and then Manny just shows up, and he's about to die. Like, that's a really well-acted scene. It's a really well-directed scene. The score there is perfect. The acting there is perfect. You got everything you needed, and you didn't have to hear a single word of dialogue, and I love that kind of stuff.
I'm having with this show a really hard time not picking the really quick, blink you miss it, hilarious only John Constantine does this kind of stuff, kinds of moments. A couple episodes ago, I picked the frozen dinner thing because I lost my mind at how funny that was. This time, it was John sees all the dead bodies, erases the board, and writes 0 days without incident.
I love that. Yeah,
that was
great.
Awesome. Also, just the look in his eye when it's revealed that Gary's going to be the sacrifice. That was so good. This guy can act, man. He's so good.
Yeah, he's great.
Didn't have a
Matt
worst
Ryan's
moment.
a fantastic Constantine.
Had no worst moment.
Neither did I.
This is fine. Let's go on to quotes. This so far, Steve, this episode has my favorite quote in the entire show.
Oh, okay.
So far, and that is, "It's not rocket surgery."
That's awesome.
That is awesome.
That one's great. I really love in the beginning when John's talking about Manny and he says, "Pennies from heaven, subtle as a serpent."
Yeah.
And then I really like somewhere in the middle where he says, "We are who we are eventually."
I wrote that one down too. By the way, always a lot of really interesting and unusual word choice in this show.
Yeah, the writing in the show is top notch. Because you can go with Arrow and Flash and stuff, and you can tell, like, yeah, this is a little bit CW sensibility. You could word this differently. With this show, you're kind of hanging on every word. Like, it's a unique perspective.
Yeah, it is, and there's a lot of like, I would never have thought to word a thing like that, and like evokes imagery I hadn't thought of before, and not much cliche or trite at all. Just everything feels really fresh a lot of the time. Let's see what else. I didn't look up any guest stars this time. I don't know if you did.
There's just the guy that played Gary Lester, as far as I found, John Joe O'Neill, and he was in Doctor Who: The Day of the Doctor.
Oh, well, that makes sense.
Yeah. So yeah, British actor. I don't remember who he is in that. He probably wasn't a very major character, but yeah. Everything else I have not seen with him.
Okay, so obviously, comic reference-wise, you said that this was actually based on a story. Did you notice anything else?
Not really. You remember in the second episode where we go into like Zed's apartment and there's like a painting on the ground of like a fly and a bug.
Yeah.
And that's the exact bug that's in the first 2 issues of the comic that this episode is adapting. So Zed kind of predicted the future of the show in that way.
Oh, interesting.
I mean, you could sit down all day and just look at all the references this one makes to the story it's adapting, because that's where all the references are.
Yeah, that's awesome. Hopes and predictions.
I really want that thing with Chaz resolved really quick. Mostly because it's not a big deal. I just I want to know what that's about, and I really want more stuff with Manny. I'm not sure how you feel about that, but Manny's really good when in those small scenes he's in.
I like him. No, I just wasn't sure about that one scene, but I'm liking how he's playing. I've always liked that actor.
No, yeah, you're right. That opening scene isn't great, but yeah, like everything he does, he's got a couple seconds every now and then he shows up. He's got very limited dialogue, but he adds a lot to it.
He's getting
I just kind of want to know what his standing is.
He's getting a little bit typecast as being like the really deceptive kind of character, but but he's getting to be like really theatrical and stuff, and I think he's pulling that off.
Yeah, I mean, he's not forgetting the fact that he's an angel. Like he's always walking around like he's got a bit of a gravitas to him.
Yeah, and that's the best word for it. You're right. He's got a lot of presence. I want to explore every inch of that hideout.
Oh yeah, that place is fantastic.
I want to know more about what's down there. I want more episodes that end up being about artifacts that are down there, stuff that we really should not have in our possession but are down here. I'm hoping more of that kind of stuff happens soon. And like I said earlier, I'm really expecting this to have a big foot that gets dropped about Zed and what she's really here for, and that she is kind of feigning ignorance a bit.
Yeah, that would be really cool.
So I think that's happening.
I don't want too many episodes of this where you get really arcy and we go from episode to episode, because it's doing the standalones really well.
They're just really
good. But if we could just build that in there, kind of like X-Files, that'd be great.
Let's go on to trivia questions. Sorry, I've got to pull up mine from last time really quick. Why don't you go ahead and give us your trivia question for this time, Steve, since Eric's not here.
Well, mine's not that hard, I don't think. Papa Midnight's actually in the first 2 issues of Hellblazer, and he gets introduced there.
Oh, that's interesting.
But in those first 2 issues, when John travels to the U.S. and meets Papa Midnight, or at least talks to him, Papa Midnight's got like a group of servants that are a certain type of monster. What monster does he use as his servants?
I meant to mention this earlier, but I want to say that Eric's trivia question from a couple weeks back was actually about the rock band that.
Yeah.
And then the very next episode name drops it. I was like, oh, that's awesome. That's really cool.
Oh yeah, that was great.
My question for last time was about the name of that church, and it was St. Asaph, and that was first mentioned, you won't believe this, Steve, once again by Zombie Thing MD. Well done to you. I was so quick on the draw, this guy. And my question for this time is, what is the name of the knife that Gary steals? It has a name. We see it there in the building, and what is the name of the knife? Anyway, so that is those are our trivia questions.
Did you get the answer for like Eric's? Because he had what song the Mucous Membrane recorded?
Is that what it was?
Yeah.
Yes.
Because if you don't have the answer, I can give it to you.
Was it Venus of the Heart Cell?
Venus of the Heart Cell, yeah.
Yes. Night's Watch Media. So good job to you. Thanks for reminding me about that. And anyway, if you know the answer to either of our questions, feel free to send us the answers, either one or both of them. Feel free to go to Geekvolution.com, go to the contact page, and send us your answers there. And if you get them right, we will mention you. If you get them right first, we will mention you at the end of next episode. Thanks always for watching. We sure appreciate it, and we are looking forward to reading your comments. And we will, of course, talk about some of those again next week. Sorry we didn't get to any of those this time. But we had to skip last week. So anyway, thanks again for watching. We sure appreciate it. I am Captain Logan.
I'm Steve Baxley.